All right, good afternoon. Just a couple of programming notes to share with you. Tomorrow is the International Day for the Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. The General Assembly will hold a commemorative meeting to mark the day. The Secretary General will deliver remarks, as well as the President of the General Assembly and, of course, representatives of member states. The keynote speaker will be the Nigerian author Wole Soyinka, who, as you know, won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1986. The youth speakers will be the Nigerian-American youth poet Salome Agbaroji, the seventh U.S. Youth Poet Laureate. The event, of course, will be streamed on UN Web TV. Also tomorrow, Geir Pedersen, our special envoy for Syria, will be briefing the Security Council on Syria, and he has told us he will be at the stakeout to take your questions afterwards. But before that, at 11 a.m., there'll be a briefing here by the G20 Sherpa, Zane Danger, who will be briefing you on South Africa's G20 presidency's priorities. That's at 11 a.m. This morning, you heard the Secretary General speak to the Security Council during a special session on UN peace operations. He reminded Council members that UN peace operations safeguard people and communities in some of the most desperate places on earth, adding that they represent a critical tool for the Council's disposal to maintain international peace and security. At their best, he said, they show how, when the UN comes together to address challenges, the burden is diminished on individual countries. But Mr. Guterres added that peace operations face serious barriers that demand new approaches. The Secretary General said the work is now underway to review all forms of peace operations as requested by member states in the recently adopted Pact for the Future. He said the review will build on the analysis presented in the new Agenda for Peace and will be informed by the first comprehensive study of the history of special political missions in the 80 years of this organization, and that report will be released soon. The review will also help inform efforts through the UN at 80 initiative to find efficiencies and improvements across our work in light of the continued funding challenges we face as an organization. His remarks were, of course, shared with you. And I have an update to share with you on Gaza. As you know, in the past week, Israel carried out devastating strikes on Gaza, claiming the lives of hundreds of civilians, including United Nations personnel, with no humanitarian aid being allowed to enter the Gaza Strip since early March. As a result, the Secretary General has taken the difficult decision to reduce the United Nations footprint in Gaza, even as humanitarian needs soar and our concern over the protection of civilians intensifies. We are not leaving Gaza. I repeat, the United Nations is not leaving Gaza. We remain committed to continuing to provide aid that civilians depend on for their survival and for their protection. More than three weeks ago, the Israeli government cut off the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza, which is the longest such suspension since October 7, 2023. Israeli officials have indicated that they intend to continue their military activities in Gaza based on the information that is currently available. The strikes hitting a UN compound in Deir el-Bala on March 19th were caused by an Israeli tank shell. The strikes claimed the life of a UN colleague from Bulgaria and left 6 others from France, Moldova, North Macedonia, Palestine, and the United Kingdom with severe injuries, some of them life-altering. The location of this UN compound was well known to all the parties in the conflict, and I reiterate that all parties to the conflict are bound by international law to protect the inviolability of United Nations premises. Without this, our colleagues face intolerable risks as they work to save the lives of civilians. The Secretary General strongly condemns these strikes and demands a full, thorough, and independent investigation into this incident. All parties must comply fully with international law at all times. Civilians must be respected and they must be protected. The denial of life-saving aid must end. The hostages must be released immediately and unconditionally. all states must use their leverage to stop the conflict and ensure respect for international law by applying diplomatic and economic pressures and combating impunity. The Secretary General renews his urgent call for the restoration of the ceasefire to bring an end to the anguish. And just to give you a bit more granularity on the situation on the ground in Gaza, Tom Fletcher, our emergency relief coordinator, said today that he continues to receive horrific reports from Gaza of more health workers, ambulances, and hospitals attacked as they tried to save survivors. Mr. Fletcher said, "We all must demand that hospitals and medics must not be targeted." Yesterday in southern Gaza, several casualties were reported after the surgical department of Nasser Medical Complex was hit and caught fire. In Rafah, ambulances were reportedly hit yesterday in Tal al-Sultan, resulting in several casualties. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society said 4 of its ambulances were targeted, as well as 10 team members carrying out humanitarian work. They say communications with the team has been completely lost for 30 hours, and at this point their fate remains unknown. As hostilities continue across Gaza, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that we and our humanitarian partners continue to face constraints in an effort to provide health services. Yesterday, our partners called for the entry of additional emergency medical teams into Gaza to help health workers already on the ground who are exhausted and, of course, overwhelmed. OCHA reports that the crossings have remained closed for cargo since March 2nd, with reports that prices of goods and commodities continue to rise. Yesterday's UNRWA's Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini warned that every day without food inches Gaza closer to an acute hunger crisis. Yesterday, Israeli authorities also issued a new evacuation order in Rafah, covering about 2% of the strip and affecting 5 neighborhoods. With this latest directive, the overall area designed for the evacuation of the past week covers an estimated 14% of the Gaza Strip, along with vast no-go zones along the borders and the Netzarim corridor. UNRWA estimates that 124,000 people have been newly displaced in just days. Many have moved on foot towards Mawasi area along one evacuation route, with large numbers of people reportedly seeking shelter at hospitals. Our partners are supporting water, sanitation, and hygiene services in Gaza tell us that 90% of people surveyed in recent weeks did not have sufficient access to water, with respondents going several days without being able to just wash their hands. Since the resumption of hostilities, and despite these challenges, our humanitarian partners have continued to screen children for malnutrition, distributing ready-to-eat complementary food to more than 7,000 infants and young children. However, the closure of several malnutrition sites located in the evacuation area in Rafah has impacted more than 100 children. Moving north to Lebanon, the situation along the Blue Line. Our peacekeeping colleagues have urged all parties to exercise maximum restraint and refrain from activities that may endanger civilians and jeopardize the progress made in advancing a relative calm in recent months. Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Janine Hennis-Plasschaert, and the head of the UN Peacekeeping Mission in Lebanon, Lieutenant General Aroldo Lazzaro, are in contact with all sides and actors to diffuse tensions and prevent any further incidents. We urge Lebanon and Israel to uphold their commitments to the cessation of hostilities. It remains crucial that the parties urgently undertake tangible steps towards the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701. UNIFIL, in the meantime, continues to support the redeployment of the Lebanese armed forces, with these armed forces deployed to approximately 100 locations in southern Lebanon. In support of the Lebanese armed forces addressing the unauthorized weapons in southern Lebanon, UNIFIL peacekeepers over the past weeks discovered a significant number of unauthorized weapons and ammunitions, mostly in the western area of its operations. There have been 195 such incidents since the cessation of hostilities commenced on November 27th of last year. All of these caches were duly reported to the Lebanese armed forces. UNIFIL has also facilitated 18 humanitarian missions in its area of operations this month, which are crucial to rebuilding lives. We reiterate once again our call for civilians and civilian infrastructure to be protected on both sides of the blue line. And our OCHA colleagues in Lebanon remain concerned by the precarious humanitarian and protection situation there as civilians continue to be impacted by military operations across the country. Over the weekend, the escalation with multiple airstrikes across Lebanon resulted in 8 deaths, including 1 child, and 44 injuries, including 5 children. That's what the Lebanese Ministry of Health is telling us. Military operations continue to exacerbate protection concerns, impede safe returns of displaced people, hinder the delivery of humanitarian assistance, and further drive up humanitarian needs. According to the International Organization for Migration, more than 96,000 people remain displaced within Lebanon, and over 960,000 are back to their communities of origin. We and our partners are continuing to support the humanitarian response across Lebanon, despite critical funding shortages. We also continue to support displaced families who are trying to return to their homes, as well as supporting host communities and those who still remain displaced. Despite the urgent need, the $371 million flash appeal that goes until the end of March remains only 12% funded. And moving to Ukraine, our humanitarian colleagues there tell us that attacks over the weekend and today have once again resulted in widespread civilian casualties, including children. Between Saturday and today, missile and drone attacks in the cities of Sumy, Zaporizhzhia, and Kyiv killed 24 civilians and injured scores of others. That's what local authorities are informing us about. Entire families, including parents and their children, were among the fatalities in Zaporizhzhia and Kyiv. Other affected areas include towns of Donetsk, Kherson, Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, Sumy, and Dnipro regions. Humanitarian organizations responded swiftly, providing medical and psychological aid, hot meals, shelter, materials, blankets, and legal support. They also registered people for repair assistance. Today, Ukraine Railways said a large-scale cyber attack is targeting its systems. As the airspace in Ukraine has been closed since February of 2022, rail travel is a primary mode of transportation for civilians and humanitarian actors. The attack severely disrupted booking and ticketing services. This has led to delays in operational challenges at several stations. Apparently, authorities are working to repair the damage and restore services. Aid organizations continue to support evacuations from border communities in Sumy region where attacks have intensified. Humanitarians are working alongside national police and rescuers to evacuate hundreds of civilians, including children and people with disabilities. Partners are also providing all types of humanitarian support. Moving to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that clashes in parts of North Kivu, South Kivu, and Ituri province continue to harm civilians and to drive people from their homes. In Ituri, clashes have forced at least 6 humanitarian organizations to suspend operations in the town of Fataki since March 18th, cutting off assistance to more than 300,000 men, women, and children. A health center in the town of Jugu was also looted, and the regional hospital in Fataki forced to close on March 14th, severely restricting people's access to medical care. Dozens of homes in the areas have also been burnt during the clashes. Still in Ituri, vital supply routes linking the towns of Mahagi to the provincial capital Bunia remain blocked due to ongoing insecurity. That's causing fuel shortages, higher prices, and limited availability of goods in Bunia and nearby areas. OCHA also reports that last week's clashes in North Kivu's Walikale territory damaged water supply infrastructure. Local civil society groups stress the need for urgent repairs to mitigate public health risks. The intense fighting in North Kivu Walikale territory between the March 14th and 20th has also forced tens of thousands of civilians to flee into neighboring Maniema province. Finally, in South Kivu, local sources report that fighting continues over the weekend in Walungu and Calais territories, triggering large-scale displacements, but no estimates are available yet as of numbers. Despite the volatile situation in South Kivu, we and our humanitarian partners started distributing food on March 22nd in 2 parts of the Calais territory, targeting more than 500,000 vulnerable people. And in Sudan, I can tell you that we're deeply alarmed by reports of mass displacements, and the large number of civilians have been killed in Al-Malat locality, which is in the northern part of North Darfur. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the situation remains volatile and unpredictable, raising serious concerns over the protection of civilians. For its part, the International Organization for Migration tells us that recent clashes in the areas have forced about 75,000 people to flee. The number of people internally displaced across Sudan remains staggeringly high at 11.3 million people, although IOM notes a slight decrease from 11.6 million people in January, with returns being reported in some areas. For those who do return, the challenges persist. In Al Jazeera state, which is in the southeast of Sudan, our partners on the ground report that thousands of people returning to the state lack food. Health centers are closed and medicines are in short supply. There's also reports of widespread looting in markets and homes, as well as the risks of arbitrary detention by armed groups. Meanwhile, WHO warns that 2/3 of the states in Sudan are experiencing multiple disease outbreaks. This includes malaria, it includes dengue, cholera, measles, and diphtheria. A hepatitis outbreak was also recently reported at a displacement camp in Kassala State. Diseases are spreading at a time where Sudan's health system is under crisis, as we've been telling you on a regular basis. According to WHO, 70 to 80% of health facilities in areas hardest hit by these hostilities are non-functional. Partners urgently need funding, supplies, and unimpeded humanitarian access to contain these outbreaks and prevent further spread. And UNICEF tells us that in Afghanistan, the new school year started today, but an additional 400,000 girls are being deprived of their right to education, bringing the total number of girls without access to this essential right to 2.2 million. That's 2.2 million girls being deprived of education. Today marks 3 years since the start of the ban on girls' secondary education. UNICEF says that if this ban persists until 2030, which we hope it won't, over 4 million girls will have been deprived of their right to education beyond primary schooling. UNICEF said Afghanistan cannot leave half of its population behind. Despite the ban, UNICEF has provided access to education to some 445,000 children through community-based learning, 64% of whom are girls. It is also empowering female teachers to ensure that girls have positive role models. And the UN mission in Libya is alarmed by the wave of arbitrary arrests and detentions across the country by law enforcement and security actors. In a press release issued over the weekend, the UN mission said these actors are using their powers to arrest and detain target individuals for their alleged political affiliation, to silence perceived dissent, and to undermine judicial independence. These unlawful practices create a climate of fear, they shrink civic space, and they erode the rule of law. The UN mission in Libya is further concerned by the pattern of video confessions where individuals are detained and coerced into quote-unquote confessing to alleged crimes with videos published online. These videos and these so-called confessions are used to intimidate and humiliate targeted individuals. And the UN Refugee Agency and the International Organization for Migration today launched their joint response plan for 1.5 million Rohingya refugees and their host communities in Bangladesh. The plan calls for $934.5 million from the international community to fund protection, shelter, and basic needs for refugees in the camps, and to support opportunities to enable them to be self-reliant. More than half of the population in the camps are women and girls who face a higher risk of gender-based violence and exploitation, while 1 in 3 Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh is aged between 10 and 24. Without access to formal education, adequate skills building, and self-reliance opportunities, their future remains on hold. UNHCR and IOM said that funding shortfalls in critical areas include reductions to food assistance, cooking fuel and basic shelter, they will have dire consequences for this highly vulnerable population and may force many of them to resort to desperate measures, as embarking on desperate boat journeys to seek safety further afield. We ask that everyone give generously. And today is the International Day for the right to the truth concerning gross human rights violations and for the dignity of victims. The day honors the memory of victims and pays tribute to those who have devoted their lives and lost their lives in the struggle to promote and protect human rights for all. Today is also World Tuberculosis Day. This year's theme is Yes, We Can End TB, Commit, Invest, and Deliver. Since I have no voice, I'll leave. No, Benno, please go
Thank
ahead.
you. I have a voice.
Yeah.
Regarding the reducing the Gaza footprint, can you give us numbers? How many personnel will be pulled? How many do you have there? And then I have some follow-ups, I guess.
Okay. What I can tell you, what we're doing is reducing the number of international staff members by about 1/3 this week, maybe a bit more likely to come. It's a temporary measure. We hope to have people return to Gaza as soon as practicable. There are about 100 international staff in Gaza currently. All of this is being done for security reasons and for operational reasons.
So just double checking, you're pulling something about like 30, 35, something like this?
Around 30, yeah, about
Okay.
30.
How will humanitarian aid and your work in the region be impacted?
Well, obviously, the impact of our work right now is the fact that military operations have resumed in parts of Gaza, that people are being told to move again, and that humanitarian aid is not going in. Those are the impacts on our work. The vast majority of the distribution is being done by local staff, local Palestinian UN staff who continue to do their work in extremely challenging circumstances.
And you said the Israeli tank hit the UN compound and it was known that this was a UN compound. Do you feel deliberately targeted?
Listen, I can't speak. I think that's one of the reasons we need to have a pretty clear and transparent investigation. The point is that the Israelis knew exactly where this UN facility was, and it was hit by a shell from one of their tanks.
Last one. Again, this is not the first time that it happens. Do you think it's possible that these attacks are a coincidence?
Look, you're correct in saying it's not the first time it's happened. It's happened before. We need to see accountability for those who took the decision, whether it was deliberate targeting, whether it was miscommunication, but there needs to be accountability. Beitul.
Thank you, Steph. Does the Secretary General have any reaction to the arrest of opposition political figures, including the mayor of Istanbul? He was removed from his office along with 3 other elected mayors in Istanbul. The crackdown on journalists. Just this morning, 6 other journalists, including one from Agence France Presse, they were detained, and hundreds of thousands of Turkish people are on the streets protesting against the arrests, which many lawyers and civil rights groups are calling unlawful and politically motivated.
We're obviously following the situation in Turkey very closely, especially, as you mentioned, as it relates to the arrest of the mayor of Istanbul, also the detention of journalists, the mass detention of journalists that we've seen. It is imperative that journalists be allowed to do their work freely without fear of harassment and detention, whether in Turkey or any place else in the world. It's also important that people be allowed to demonstrate peacefully and freely without any risk of their rights being violated, and we hope to see due process being followed.
And Just a follow-up. Did the Secretary General contact any Turkish officials?
I'm not aware of any contact between the Secretary General and Turkish officials, but I will check.
Does he plan to, or did you have any calls from any
I will update you
figures
as
from
soon as
Turkey?
I have information. Deji, Linda, then Pam, then Gabriel.
I have several questions, but first a follow-up. According to the statement, based on the information, UN decide that the deadly attack in Deir el-Balah is from an Israeli tank. Has the UN shared this information with Israeli authority,
Yes.
and what is their response? Have they responded?
I don't have a response from them, but they very well know. We've shared with them what we know.
Okay. My question here, we know that the 42nd entrance has been closed. How much money can UN save from the closure of that entrance? Do you have a...
I don't have a hard figure. It's part of just generally a lessening of overtime spending.
But speaking of money, has the Secretariat had any update on the UN Ops ASG Virtual Boeing's 63 million failed investment? Will there be any update
No,
on
we
that
continue
one?
to cooperate with the various law enforcement agencies that are involved in this case.
Okay, one last question. It's been reported that UN is sending staffers an email suggest all staff members and their families to carry a form of identification at all time to show maybe people by if stopped by authorities in New York. Has this ever happened before?
Not in my memory.
So why send in this email to
I
all
think,
staff members?
It's something to reassure. It's a good reminder for staff members to carry identification with them, including photos of their visas. Pam, then Linda, then Pam, then Gabriel, and then Edie. Sorry.
Thank you, Steph. Apropos of Gaza, you mentioned 30 staff members, international staff members, will be leaving. In total, how many Palestinian staff members are currently on the job?
I mean, the bulk of them are UNRWA, I think around 13,000 or so.
Okay. And then stepping to Afghanistan, what is the status of Afghan women working, for the UN and humanitarian efforts? I remember that they were banned.
Yeah, it's a good question. I believe, let me get you a more, let me not make something up off the top of my head, and I'll get you an update on that.
Thank you.
Pam.
Thank you, Steph. On the Riyadh talks on Ukraine peace, the U.S. advisor, Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, said yesterday that one of the first priorities is going to be to reestablish the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Will the UN put back in place what it had in 2022 until 2023 with all the operational structures? Thank you.
I don't think we want to get ahead of ourselves. We obviously welcome the ongoing talks. The issue of freedom of navigation on the Black Sea is something that we've continued to work on, notably through the work of Rebecca Greenspan at UNCTAD. She and her office stand ready to assist in any way they can. Gabriel.
Thank you, Steph. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Of the roughly 30 international staff that are being taken out of Gaza, do you have a breakdown on which agencies they work for by any chance?
I don't have an exact breakdown, but I can tell you that in terms of the agencies impacted, it includes OCHA, the World Food Program, UNICEF, UNOPS, UNFPA, WHO, UNDP at this point.
Thank you. And as you previously mentioned, the vast majority of UN staff members in Gaza are Palestinians. What is the Secretary General's message to the Palestinian staff members that don't have the luxury of perhaps being able to leave the country? Can he guarantee their safety?
Listen, the bottom line is, and as we've seen it, right? The Secretary General doesn't have the power to guarantee the safety of UN staff, whether they are internationals, whether they are nationals, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in the Congo, in the Central African Republic, Ukraine or anywhere else. The people who have the power to guarantee the safety of UN staff are those member states who need to uphold international law, who need to uphold international humanitarian law, who need to ensure the safety of the very personnel for an organization of which they are a member of, and for many of these missions that they have sent out onto the field.
And lastly, does the Secretary General have any comment about two more journalists that have been assassinated in Gaza? Mohammed Mansour from Palestine Today, killed in his home, and Hossam Shabat from Al Jazeera, killed while he was in his vehicle.
I think it's yet another reminder of the risks that journalists take to report in Gaza. It is imperative that journalists be protected and never be targeted. Edie Lederer, Associated Press.
Thank you, Steph. Do you have any indication of how much humanitarian aid is left in Gaza, since there have been no deliveries now, for going on 3 weeks?
I don't have exact numbers for you. I can tell you that what we have, we are trying to stretch out to make it last as long as possible, but I'll see if I can get you a bit of hard numbers. Okay, Abdelhamid, I think you have a question.
Can you hear me? Okay, I have a few questions, Steph. In the people of the refugee camp of Tell al-Sultan, which is next to Rafah, had been appealing. They are being besieged, and they said genocide is underway now in Tell al-Sultan. Are you aware of this development?
I haven't seen the particulars of that particular appeal, but we're, as you can imagine, we're extremely aware of what is actually going on in Gaza, as we've been talking about it daily. Your other question.
My other question, a young Palestinian of 17-year-old has just died in Israeli jail. His name is Walid Khalid Abdullah Ahmed in the prison of Megiddo. Have you come across this development as well?
Okay. Thank you all. We shall see you
You didn't hear my question? Hello?
Do you have a third question?
Yes. There is 600 UNRWA staff in Egypt. UNRWA cut off their salaries for a couple of months now, and they've been appealing to the international community to address their grievances in Egypt. Are you aware of this also, and what can you say about it?
I am not aware of this particular case. I would encourage you to contact our colleagues at UNRWA. Thank you. Good day, and hopefully I have more of a voice tomorrow.